you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, 'cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, 'cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K, it's the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-K.
All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K, it's the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, 'cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, 'cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K, it's the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-K.
S-I-C-K.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. With Tony Marinaro.
55 seconds left in the penalty, a minute and 27 seconds left in regulation time. Boston 4, Montreal 3. Lafleur coming out rather gingerly on the right side. He gives it into Lemaire, back to Lafleur. Oh!
The sickest Montreal Canadiens podcast.
You're in the ball!
Sports entertainment like no other.
Rejoint, on lui fait perdre la rondelle, une passe devant. Et c'est le dégagement, et ce sera la victoire des Canadiens. Coupe Stanley pour les Canadiens, leur 23e de l'histoire.
You found the dogs! John, you found the dogs! He found the dogs! And all together, they worked a young team to the top. And now, a 24th Stanley Cup banner will hang from the rafters of the famous Forum in Montreal. The Canadiens win the Stanley Cup!
Brought to you by Energy Transportation Group. Driven to be different. La Vida TV. Embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination. It's gonna be sick.
Marinaro on this Wednesday, June 12th. How is everyone doing? It is a couple of minutes past 10 p.m. Eastern. I am in Montreal. And of course, the Sick Podcast presented by Betway, a leading global online betting and gaming brand that offers you a leading betting experience. Go on betway.com or scan the QR code to join the action. Must be 18 and over and play responsibly. And of course, we are on our way to Vegas, June 25th to June 30th. We're going to be there, and we're going to be broadcasting live from Las Vegas. And of course, our NHL Draft Coverage 2024 is brought to you by Betway. Marinaro, thanks in part to Energy Transportation Group, a leading full-service logistics provider serving all of North America. Also presented by Bittt, Tibi, brewed in Quebec, a winner of a dozen international awards. Bittt Tibi offers quality microbrewery beers made with premium ingredients for everyone's taste. Bittt Tibi, embrace your true nature. We give a shout out to Playground, and I'm going to talk to you about the great people at Playground and what they have going on just a little bit later on. I don't remember when was the last time we went live because, of course, throughout the NHL playoffs, we don't go live that often. I think the last time we actually went live, I think Eric Engels was my guest, and I think we answered some of your Habs questions, and it was so popular that a couple of weeks later, we've decided to do it again. So without further ado, let me see if I can bring him in from Sportsnet, sportsnet.ca, a regular collaborator on the Sick Podcast throughout the entire hockey season, mostly on Mondays, but we shuffle him around every now and then to fit him in when we can. Eric, what's going on?
Not much, Tony. You look fresh, man. You look ready to go.
I look fresh, yeah. Well, I said this yesterday, but I have to tell you, I had a bad 72 hours where I don't know what I was hit with, whether it was a flu, whether it was food poisoning or whatever it was. But whatever I was hit with, let me tell you, it was pretty hard. It was pretty hard. In bed Saturday afternoon, all day Sunday, pretty much all day Monday. I got up to do the podcast. I was sweating while I was doing it. I did the podcast on Tuesday, sweating while I was doing that one, and Wednesday, and I'm still sweating. But you know what? I think I'm going to live.
Well, I'm happy to hear that. That's good news for everybody who's watching.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Mind you, I have a 10-year life insurance short-term policy that's going to be up in a couple of months. And if something would happen, you know what? I think my wife's going to be taken care of. But anyway, it's another story for another day, I guess. You know what? When we decided to go live, I wasn't quite sure that we were going to have as many topics as we actually do because, and I'm sure you saw this, but Pierre LeBrun has reported that the Canadiens are very open to targeting UFAs, even if it's short term. It's something we talked about Steven Stamkos at one point, whether or not there was a possibility, and whether Stamkos is short term or long term, I don't know. We know that Jonathan Marchessault is also an unrestricted free agent. There are others, and it's very interesting to hear that though, because I think Eric, you and I had actually quite figured out that where they were in the rebuild, they were ready to take the next step. But some people weren't sure as to whether or not the Canadiens were going to take that next step or wanted to. And based on information like this, it looks like this team is really going to push hard for a playoff participation next season.
Listen, I think everything's about availability, Tony. They are looking for every single option available to them to improve their team, to give themselves that much better of a chance. I think they believe a lot in the culture that they've built, that they will organically take step forwards with the guys that they have that have been playing under Martin St. Louis in the system that has taken shape, and the commitment to it that everybody has. That has to happen anyways. But also, you have some of these younger players who are getting a bit older, and they want to see the Canadiens take a step forward. And I think you and I talked about this at one point or another, that if you look at the first two phases of this rebuild, it's hard to find a move that management has made where you'd be like, wow, that's really off the book and it's not good. It seems as though they've taken the right steps to get to here. But this is the most critical juncture. This is the difficult part of this rebuild. You're under a lot of pressure to improve. And we've seen a lot of teams around the Canadiens take steps backwards by doing something just to nudge yourself forward, but at all costs, instead of carefully calculated, pragmatically going after somebody who is not only adding to your talent pool, but also fitting properly within that. So when you think about free agency, when you think about trades, when you think about the draft, all of that is on the table. It shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that the Canadiens would consider making some moves in free agency, because there's no guarantee they're going to be able to make a trade that fits and makes sense for them. I'll say this, Tony. They're not interested in making sideways moves just to bring talent in. If it means giving up something that's really important to their future just to bring somebody in who might help them make the playoffs next year, that's not the goal. It's not the stated goal of this management group. They want to build a team that will year over year compete for the Stanley Cup. And they're in that zone here where you got to be careful about what your next moves are, but I think they're looking at every option available to them.
The Sick Podcast is brought to you in part by Playground. Play lucky numbers at Playground. Earn your entries daily and return every Sunday for a chance to win a share of the $15,000 in cash prizes with a $5,000 top prize. And on July 28th, one lucky winner will take home $10,000 at the $30,000 finale. Visit playground.ca for details. All right. I took a couple of excerpts out of Pierre LeBrun's piece in The Athletic. And let's start with Pierre LeBrun on Patrik Laine. Listen to this. My understanding is that the Columbus Blue Jackets intend to work with Patrik Laine's camp, led by agent Andy Scott of Octagon, to find the star winger a fresh start with a new team. Laine remains in the NHLPA Player Assistance Program, having sought help in January. He also recently had a minor shoulder cleanup procedure, but that's not expected to be an issue. The expectation is that he'll be ready to go for next season. The 26-year-old's 2016 number 2 pick has 2 years left on his contract at an $8.7 million cap hit. And given his offensive struggles in Columbus, it may not be a huge market for him. On the other hand, there's the allure of a potential bounce-back season for a star player energized by a fresh start. Depending on the acquisition cost, a team might see itself picking up a 40-goal scorer at a reduced price. Laine has a 10-team no-trade list, so his camp will have some say in things. But again, the idea is that the new Jackets general manager, Don Waddell, and Laine's agent want to work on this together to find a new spot for the player. It was, give or take, probably 3-4 weeks ago, whatever it was, I had Grant McCagg on. And we talked about, should Patrik Laine be a target? And, you hear the name Patrik Laine and you hear player assistance program, and some are right away going to go, no, don't touch that. Grant and I had a real good chat, and Grant said, okay, so obviously he was in the player assistance program, and that's a red flag for a lot of people. You can understand that. But 6'5", 220-pound wingers at 26 years of age, who's a right-handed shot, who can play either wing, who went number 2 overall in the draft 8 years ago, and have had seasons of 36 goals in 73 games, 44 goals, 30 goals, 28 goals in 68 games. 10 goals in 45 games, 26 goals in 56 games, 22 goals in 55 games, 6 goals in 18 games last year. We're talking about a 35-plus goal scorer here. Those players are really hard to come by. And given everything he's gone through, this is the time where you can probably have him for less than ever before. So we discussed whether or not there should be interest and where Laine would fit in and what he could do for the power play and all that stuff. Do you believe the Canadiens to be one of the teams that are interested in his services? Yes or no?
Oh, see, you have the whole preamble, but then you put me at a yes or no, and it's a difficult question to answer yes or no. Everything revolves around the cost of acquisition, right? And I don't think it'll be prohibitive. I don't think it'll be too expensive to acquire Patrik Laine, but expenses don't just come down to what he makes on the cap and what you're giving away in the trade. Expense involves the risk you're taking on and taking on the player, not just because he was in the player assistance program, but because of what we've seen from him on the ice over the last year. You know, there was a point where he was a healthy scratch for a while under Pascal Vincent, or a couple of games at least, and then back into the lineup in Columbus against Montreal. I was at the game. And I could tell you that the impression this player left me with watching him play that game, and maybe it's because he was dealing with a lot of stuff off the ice, was that he didn't care. And he scored, I don't know if you remember or not, he scored a goal in that game on a breakaway, or it was a penalty shot. I can't remember, one or the other. And it was a game I walked away with saying, like, if I was Pascal Vincent, I would scratch him again. Like, his effort level on a couple of back-checking plays where, I mean, it just was non-existent. And you'll check my record on this. Like, I rarely say that about a player. I rarely like to pin it exclusively on effort. I think it's kind of a lazy way of looking at players. You know, these guys make it to a certain level because they care, you know. It's just, there is risk in this player. It doesn't mean that the Canadiens shouldn't take that risk. You know, I think for a couple of years, if it doesn't work out and you let him go, then so be it. It could be a risk that really pays off with a very high reward, especially if the acquisition cost is not excessive, which I don't think it should be, considering what has happened with this player over the last couple of years in Columbus. Would he be the primary number one target of the Canadiens? I have a hard time believing that. But I don't think he'd be off the table in terms of somebody they might look at.
I'm about to say something that's going to go viral tomorrow. So
I hope so for you. Better you than me.
Yeah, you're right about that. It's a big if.
Okay.
If his problems or whatever plagued them are going to be taken care of. We just read there that he's still in the player assistance program, and I don't know what the problem is or what the problems are. So let's just say there was a clean bill of health and he's 100% rehabilitated and ready to go. I call Columbus and I say, we have a winger, a big winger. He makes $8.5 million a year. Is it 8.7? I'm sure you'd like to shed some money off the cap. I'm going to offer you one big winger who makes 5.5 on the cap. That's, once again, if whatever has plagued them end up becoming problems of the past and he's 100% rehabilitated. Because obviously, if he's not, there's no use going any further in this discussion. It's off the table. You understand what I'm getting at, right? Because you said something interesting, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I've seen Laine dog it. I have. We've seen Pierre-Luc Dubois dog it. And I don't even know why we're actually even talking about individual players, because you know what? There's a lot of players who have had shifts or games where they've dogged it in the National Hockey League. One of the things you brought up was Pascal Vincent scratched them. Okay, but the Canadiens had a couple of players last year who did not have a good season The only difference is they had a coach who never chose to scratch them. Right? Like we're saying Pascal Vincent scratched them, right? Well, Marty St. Louis had ample opportunity to scratch a player or two last year too, but never chose to do so. So should we say Pascal Vincent scratched them? Vincent's probably a little bit sees it a different way, right? In terms of scratching, but I've seen Laine dog it. So I'm with you. I understand where you're getting at. You know? You're speechless. Did I lose you or
No, I'm listening to you. I'm listening to you and I'm checking something.
Yeah.
Okay.
What are you checking?
I'm checking to see if the player you're talking about, which is Josh Anderson, has any sort of trade protection.
Okay.
And he has an 8-team no trade list.
Okay.
Given that he came from Columbus to Montreal,
Mm-hmm.
I can't say with any degree of certainty, but it wouldn't surprise me if Columbus was on that list. Also, if you were talking about a one-for-one swap of Josh Anderson and Patrik Laine, I don't think Don Waddell is going to do that.
Okay.
But I understand where you're coming from.
But it's going to be very hard
right?
Very hard to get rid of a player who makes 8 point. Is it 8.7?
Yeah, I think so. I'd have to look, but yes.
Okay, so very hard to get rid of a player who makes 8.7 on the cap without taking back any money whatsoever. I mean, who's got that flexibility to do that?
I agree. But what do you have to give as a sweetener to do that? Like, I understand the concept of a problem for a problem, but I don't know if it's an even swap. Let's put it that way.
I got you.
I do agree. Some money has to go back in a deal where you're taking back that amount of salary.
Yeah, it's 8.7 for the next 2 years. 8.7.
Typically in the deals we've seen where you have that type of deal transpire, there's something as a sweetener thrown into a deal like that. And when we're talking about a player like Laine, regardless of what the risks are, what he's been through, that goal scoring potential that Pierre talked about in his article is undeniable. Now, it's not as valuable, obviously, and I think any GM trading for him is going to make that argument if, for whatever reason, the cost looks like something prohibitive and they really want the player, that if Patrik Laine scores 40 goals and also costs you 40 goals, what are you really gaining? You know, like that is an argument I'd be making from the other side of the table if, for whatever reason, I was willing to take a bet and make a risky kind of proposition to get that player, and somebody was trying to take advantage of me in the trade. Yeah, you know, I might bring that up.
I would tell you what you would gain if you end up acquiring a player who scores 40, but he gives up 40. I would say that he becomes another player who becomes a project for Marty St. Louis, that Marty could teach him how to play that 200-foot game and become more of an all-round player.
Meanwhile,
the way, the same kind of work that he was doing with Cole Caulfield this season.
And I believe wholeheartedly in the development model and the people in place to execute it. Marty at the top of that chain. We talked about Josh Anderson having an 8-team no trade list. I wonder if Patrik Laine, with everything he's been through, would want to play in Canada and particularly in a white hot market like Montreal.
I hear you.
And he has some protection too. But look, if we're just talking about, and you asked me a yes or no question, if you think the Canadiens would be in hot pursuit of this player, I really think it would come down to whether or not they could get a fair deal. And even at that, again, I'll stick by the notion that he may be a target, but I don't think he'd be the primary one.
I hear you. And obviously you would think that there would be more interest in a Trevor Zegras, and you would think that there would be more interest in a Martin Necas. Speaking of Martin Necas, let's bring up what Pierre LeBrun wrote in The Athletic. Okay. The Hurricanes, with interim GM Eric Tulsky leading the conversations, have set a high price on what they feel is a star caliber player with Necas. I don't believe those 5 to 7 teams have yet to produce an offer that would get it done, but the Canes will keep on working on it because they also don't feel there's a time crunch on any of this. The Winnipeg Jets, Chicago Blackhawks, Montreal Canadiens, Calgary Flames, and Boston Bruins are among the teams that have shown general interest. Whether they are among the 5 to 7 Carolina sees as matches, I'm not sure. That's interesting. And, we've also been told Carolina feels that Necas is a star potential player. And so that they're going to, the asking price is high. You're laughing. What are we laughing about?
I'm laughing because, I think the owner has a massive say in what they ask for a player like that. Star, 71 points 1 year, down to 50 this year, third line in the playoffs, second power play. The precedent here, for these types of deals, for a guy who's arbitration eligible, a couple of years away from UFA, can kind of decide where he's going to go. Whoever's going to give up for him is going to have to sign him to a deal because they kind of get closed in. We saw it happen with Pierre-Luc Dubois. I think the precedent actually is Dubois with 262-point seasons or so in a row before he got traded to LA. And, all the word is that Carolina wants a star player back.
By the way, I'm with you on this one, right? You're telling everyone this guy's a star. He's a star player. You're not trading him.
Yeah, you
don't think he's a star player. That's why you're trading him.
It's all well and good to want a star back, but show me the precedent deal where a star gets traded for that type of player. The closest comparable by far is Pierre-Luc Dubois. And what did he net? He netted a second-round pick, Kupari, Velarde,
and Iafallo.
Yeah. And with respect to Velarde, who had a really good season, none of those guys are stars. If I'm Carolina also, and they're looking to make a forward swap, okay, maybe Winnipeg is a team with Nikolai Ehlers potentially on the market that gets looked at. I think Pierre mentioned that. I look at those other teams that are involved, Boston and Calgary. What do they have that Carolina could really need? A goalie. That's something to consider.
Big time.
Whether or not Carolina sees that as enough of a draw for them to do what they want to do. I just don't understand this star. To me, it's you want to within the same sentence, them talking about him potentially staying there, right? They can take him to arbitration, sign him to a 1-year deal, kick the can down the road, try and make something better happen with him, increase his value. The fact that that's even there is are they really going to get what they want for this player? And are they going to have to come to the table and be a little bit more reasonable? Because I think you and I have talked about this also. We don't see one-sided trades happen in the NHL. And I'm not denying the potential of this player. I think he has the potential to be a very good player. But is he so good that he has already proven to be worth a star caliber player coming back in return? I don't think so. I also look at the needs. I know people have looked at Montreal and said, well, they're not necessarily a fit. And maybe if the owner is driving the bus there on this trade, maybe he doesn't see them as one either. But I've looked at their sheet. They have 5 free agent defensemen? How are they filling those spots if they lose a couple of them?
If I'm the Bruins, I trade Allmark for Necas. If I think, however,
is that going to get it done straight up? If that's what they're asking for a star back,
no, but they're asking for a star. I don't believe all that stuff.
But if I'm them, Allmark would be a guy I would circle and highlight. He'd be top of mind in terms of a guy that I would want, that I think I could platoon with somebody else, but give him the lion's share, because I think Kokachev is actually a pretty good goalie. I don't know. The whole conversation around this player right now is confusing to me.
Yeah, but listen, I want to get back to the Bruins. If I'm the Bruins, sure. I'm hoping that he can play center for me, because he is a center who has been playing wing over the last couple of years, and it doesn't look, he got beat out by Jordan Staal. I mean,
he's always wanted to play center.
Yeah, Jordan Stahl's at a time in his career where he should not be beating out Martin Necas at center ice position. If Necas wants to play center and the Bruins see him as a center, I think the Bruins really need help at center. I know that Zach and Coyle had a real good regular season, but I think
and I are both going to have to figure out how to say this guy's name, though. I'm telling you, I'm pretty sure it's Nasic.
Is it really Nasic? Really?
I don't know. I've been saying Necas. But I think it's actually pronounced Nasic.
Really? I call him Necas, but
anyway. Figure it out. You're right on Kovacevic, so all of us call him Kovacevic. So
there we go. All right, okay. Why don't we do this? Why don't we bring up a couple of questions? But before we do, I want to give a shout out to Mecha Moto. Mekamoto is a Moto Guzzi, Piaggio, and Vespa dealer. They've been around for 100 years. The owner right now of the location has been there for the last 10 years of the 100 as owner. And on Thursday, June 27, they're having an all-day open house, and they're doing road tests. So pop in to do a road test all day long on Thursday, June 27. They're located at 4398 de la Roche, and they're in the sector of pretty much where a lot of the Portuguese establishments are in that sector. Would be Rosemont, I think, pretty much. But anyway, check them out. That mekamoto.ca is their website. And so once again, Thursday, June 27, circle that in your calendar. All-day road tests. We have some questions. Sammy and Yellow at Master Control. Why don't we bring them up? Chris Couture, I know we're talking about moving the rebuild into the next phase. Oh, it's Mount Royal, by the way. It's Mount Royal, where they are. I know we're talking about moving the rebuild into the next phase, but is there any chance that the Habs could take on a bad contract this summer with 1 or 2 years remaining in order to pick up another first-round pick in the draft, or are we past that point? Eric, everything's open, like you have said, but I think they've turned that corner. But I would say that if the possibility was there, they would explore it. But I don't think that's the number one thing right now that they're looking at. How about you?
I would agree. I don't think it's the primary objective. That said, you're never past the point where you're interested in collecting first-round picks, right? If such a deal is on the table that isn't prohibitive cap-wise for you, that you have the space to take that on while still having the space to improve your team, plus you get that type of asset, those things come in handy for when it comes time to pull the trigger on the types of moves that they'd like to make. So I wouldn't say no, but I wouldn't think it's front of mind for them right now.
I think they're more at the point right now where they will trade pick 26. They will trade another draft pick, and they will trade a player and or prospect to go get immediate help. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but if you're telling me one or the other, I think the Canadiens are more at that point right now where they're going to try and get immediate help to once again make them a better team right away. They've talked about trying to accelerate the rebuild. That's what they want to do here now.
I agree, but I also think the draft is going to be so interesting when it comes to the Canadiens, right? We don't know what's going to happen 2, 3, 4, but if it plays out in such a way that they have one of 2 or 3 players that they really have circled for their number 5 pick, and they're guaranteed to get that player who's a building block for their team, it'll turn into something so interesting in terms of what they're going to do with the 26th pick, right? I could see them coupling that with a defenseman, potentially moving to that slot between 14 and 10, and ending up with another player that they feel has slipped through the top 10, but is a player that they feel could be a part of their core moving forward. And then they could attack free agency. I mean, there are so many permutations of what they might do here. And it's funny, you brought up Necas. We've talked about Zegras. They are the only 2 players essentially that we've heard, and Laine is another that now is starting, that name is going to resurface and more than once, not just because Pierre mentioned it today. I think a lot of people were wondering about this player, but we haven't heard about anybody else, right? There's going to be players that suddenly become available in the next month that nobody knew of, and except for the guys who are making those phone calls, 32 general managers, right? So
yeah,
I just think there's so many different ways to skin this cat. It's going to get really interesting in the next month.
Permutations, by the way, that is PERMUTATIONS. Thank you very much. Game of Scrabble, whenever you want. All right, okay, let's bring up the next one for you, Eric. Considering the conservative/risk-less mindset of the Habs scouting team, and with a Gordon that showed in a recent video his interest in picking high-risk, high-reward players, would you think there's a certain animosity within the organization in regards to picking Demidov? Alex Cadot with the question. Eric?
No, I don't think so. From everything I've heard, I think they really like the player. Again, you have to be so careful what you hear nowadays when it comes to the draft, because teams are so and the Canadiens are certainly one of them, so careful about information, and they don't want anybody knowing or thinking about what they're going to do. But I think they do like the player, and I think there's a lot of teams that like the player. And I know there's some consternation about whether or not you can get the player over here, even though there's only 1 year left on his deal. But in terms of just talking about the player, which they're going to know a lot more about in a week when Dan Milstein brings him over for a little mini combine that he's holding for some of his Russian clients.
Yeah.
He may not hit the ice, but the opportunity to speak to him, get a character evaluation, really drill down on that is there for the Canadiens and every other team that'll attend. But I don't think there's any animosity or major concern just in terms of the player. Now the situation, I can't speak to how they feel about it.
Nick
Bobrov, I think they like him.
Nick Bobrov has already drafted a Russian with a top 10 pick. I mean, he's done it before, and he's going to do it again. Different team, different situation. I get it, but they're going to go with the best player available. And, one of the things that look, the Canadiens need to add talent, and they need to add physicality and character. Going to be very hard to be able to find all of that in one player. And if they do, that'll probably be the player they'll draft. And if they don't, then they're probably going to try and draft 2 players or draft one and acquire another one so that they end up, checking these boxes. Next. Any early predictions for someone unexpected who could stay late at camp this year? Well, this is an early one for the kind of question. This coming in from Brendan. Is there someone who might surprise and stick around at camp?
Oh my gosh.
I'll give a name.
Okay, go for it.
Farrell.
Yeah, that was one I thought about also, just because of some of the things someone from the organization said about how he developed this year. And yes, he battled injuries and there were some things, but they saw some things from him on the ice at both ends where they really felt that he took a step forward. And I know it's not reflected in him lighting up the league like maybe Maverick Bourque or some of the other guys that were in the AHL this year that were tremendous, but they see NHL potential in him. The question is whether or not there's a fit for him on one of the lines, and it'll come down to basically injuries, health, whatever it is, and where everybody's at and who gets moved in, who gets moved out. I want to think on that one. I don't have another name that immediately springs to mind as a potential surprise guy. Last year, I mean, Norlinder came out of nowhere, had a great camp after so much promise and potential, and then it looked like it wasn't going to happen, and it kind of faded as the season went along, and the opportunity wasn't really there for him. But I have to think about another name, but Farrell's a good one.
I have other names.
Okay.
I'm not sure if he's coming to camp, but if he is, Kapanen.
Yeah, that's one that I would definitely look at and say, okay, can he fill a role here? Like, is there a role that's available to him that we might be upgrading on one of our players by putting him in the lineup? Luke Tuck is a guy I would look at too. You just look at the brand of hockey, and I'm sure he needs some professional experience. But when you talk about grit, physicality, grinder type guy, I think there's room in the competition for somebody like that to emerge and potentially make somebody else expendable. And, I'll give you this one. Like Raphael Harvey-Pinard has a contract for next year, but if I'm him, I'm looking over both shoulders right now.
Big time.
So if we want to talk about a player that I think at this point could be qualified as a surprise to be in the roster despite his contract situation, it might be him.
Yeah.
He has to have a great camp. He has to come in and really show that last year was a blip on his progression.
I agree with you. I'll tell you what hurts him. He's a small energy player on a team that needs to get bigger. Right? I know you're going to tell me that Suzuki's thick, but he remains 5'11", and I get back to that. And Newhook's 5'11", and Caulfield is 5'8", and they're going to have Hudson who's 5'7", and Gallagher's 5'9", and Raphael Harvey-Pinard's 5'9". I mean, this is like, I know like everyone's watching the Stanley Cup playoffs. There's no ice available.
Yeah.
There's no room on the ice.
I don't know if that's
There's
urgent.
somebody hitting you and punishing you every single second.
Yeah. And I don't know if that's urgent for like this year where the Canadiens are not expected to be a cup contender, but I think there is a definite desire within the management group to alter that picture. The one thing I'll say about Pinard when I say that he's got to have a great camp, to me, it's not about him filling the net. What I need to see from that player and what they'll need to see from him, more importantly, is that he's going to win his battles. That didn't happen last year. I'm sorry, and that was one thing that I found to be disappointing about his season more than anything. It's not, it was snake bit. He had some bad luck in terms of putting the puck in the net. I think he can do a bit better on that side. But the amount of times he wasn't able to just win his one-on-one battles is surprising, considering the tenacity of the player and the will of the player. And the things that we saw from him when his rookie season when he came in just weren't there. And maybe it's definitely in part because he had 2 leg injuries.
Yeah.
But if he's going to make his way in the NHL, and now with guys like Jacky and Tuck in the organization, now in the professional level, he better not just be looking over both shoulders, but straight ahead of him and winning those battles. Because if he does that, he can be a player that understandably is not huge, but it is about winning your battles in that type of role, right? So
yeah, let's go to another question here. Naples Glory. What if the Habs took the pick from Winnipeg, the pick from Colorado, and our 3rd round pick plus a defenseman, and tried to move up further in the draft rather than trade for a Zegras or a Nishkash? Try to move up further in the draft. What are we talking about? Moving from 5th to 4th or 5th to 3rd?
No, I think it's more the scenario that I outlined, which is taking a defenseman in the 26th pick and moving into, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 range. I think if I understand the question correctly, I think that's what he's saying, instead of trading for one of the players who might be available.
Okay, I got it. You know what?
Which I personally think could be a very good idea. Like, if you end up with Seneca or Yzerman, or maybe you end up with New Jersey's pick at, I think they're 10th overall.
Yes,
and yes. Suddenly a Ginla's there. I'm not saying he will be, but
you're saying always maintaining the 5th pick overall.
Yeah, you maintain the 5th.
I got you. Yes,
I think the question is, you take the 26th, another pick, and a defenseman.
Yes, there's no doubt in my mind.
Further up the draft,
there's no doubt in my mind.
That could really happen.
No doubt in my mind the Canadiens would love to have 2 picks in the top 10. No doubt in my mind they'd love
even top. Like, where's Seneca projected to go right now?
All depends. I mean, if a team wants to draft by need over talent, or there's a lot of people believe that Beckett Seneca is just what the doctor ordered for the Montreal Canadiens, and the Canadiens are drafting 5th. Now, having said that, on most lists, he's probably 12th.
I think if you look at how good the defensemen are at the top end of this draft, and how many of them have the potential to be number 1s, if not number 2s at worst. Yeah. It's going to be hard for him to crack up there. And I think, there are forwards, no matter how much the Canadiens like that player, that they probably have higher up on their own list. I haven't seen their list, and I can imagine what kind of debate is going to go on in those rooms over the next couple of weeks, because it's going to be really hard for them to know what's going to happen at 2, 3, 4. But I get the feeling they're going to have one of the players they have circled available to them at 5. And if that happens, it really opens up the door for something like what this person just suggested in his question, right? Like, they could take 26, they could take a defenseman if you need to sweeten it with another deal. Like, they've got 8 picks in the first 4 rounds this year. And I think they have the same situation next year in 2025. Not that they'd have to dip into that. Like, I just think you're in good shape when you have good options. And that's why when we talk about adding talent to the Canadiens and making sure you got to get a top 6 forward and this and that, it's not just go grab anybody, because you make the wrong move with the wrong guy, no matter how good they are and what talent they have, and they're not the right fit, you're setting yourself back. And I know that's one thing the Canadiens really want to be careful about now, and they have to be, because there's just so many examples around them of teams that have done that and screwed themselves up a couple years into their rebuilds and extended those rebuilds by a couple years.
I would trade the 26th in a second round and even a player on the roster to try and move into the top 10 with another pick. I would.
Yeah, I would do something similar to get between 10 and 14. Like, I think you could end up walking away from the draft with 2 players who could be part of your core. I think there is that type of talent available, falling potentially just outside the top 10. And then you start looking at different we've seen a lot of trades happen post-draft also, by the way. It doesn't all have to happen. If the Canadiens don't swing a deal right away on that day, don't freak out. Like, there's a lot of, that's when I talk about permutations and options. Like, there's a lot of different things that could happen here. And I think
they will swing a deal on draft day. They will.
By the way,
they will.
I think so too. But by the way, Tony, like, free agency, I don't think it's certainly not the goal to go out and grab a guy who's 30 years old and sign him to an 8-year max deal. Okay, a 7-year max deal if he's a free agent. But I don't think a medium to long-term deal on a guy who's 27 years old is out of the question either. Like, there's a lot of different things that could happen here. And if you look at the list of free agents, there's a couple names out there that you could go with a 6-year deal and he still fits kind of age range at 27 years old, that it wouldn't be the dumbest bet that you could make, especially if you're able to fill needs through the draft.
Yeah.
So I can't wait for it to come, and we're going to have a few conversations between now and then.
Yeah.
So I'm excited.
A couple of more questions. John Vamignakis. If Lindstrom or Demidov aren't available when the Habs go to pick, do they opt for a defenseman or trade the pick for immediate help? No. I'm going to answer this. I'll give you an opportunity to answer as well. Let's bring back up the question if we can. I believe that if the Canadiens pick and Lindstrom and Demidov are not available, I still believe they're going to draft a forward. And I believe they'll draft a Ginla or Seneca. My opinion.
I'm not as certain as you are on that. I think there's some defensemen that are available that if one of them were to land in that spot and both those guys were already gone, I think maybe this is a popular opinion now, and it seems to be based on how that question was formed, that Lindstrom and Demidov, if one of them is available, I think everybody likes the chances that the Montreal Canadiens take that player, whichever one it is, right?
Yeah.
I don't think any of us are envisioning both of them being available at 5. It's not impossible, though. But on the very good chance that one of them might be or is, I think they probably pick that player. But if neither of them are available and they have a defenseman circled on their list that they look at and say is absolutely a number 1 defenseman moving forward, we'll see. And if there's another forward that they really, really like, but they feel would be a bit of a reach at 5, then they'll start to look at opportunities to trade down, because there's a number of teams that are behind them that would probably kill to have one of the defensemen that might be available to the Canadiens at 5. So I'm not as certain as you are that if those 2 forwards are gone, they just grab another forward at 5. I think they'll have to look at what they have. What'll be important in their evaluation over the next couple of weeks, as important as trying to figure out what's going to happen at 2, 3, 4, is what's going to happen at 6, 7, 8, 9. They need to figure that out also. And so they can evaluate what their trade opportunities will be if for whatever reason they get into that position and they say to themselves, there's no defenseman left and there's no forward left that we feel so adamantly about that we would want to pick him at 5, but there's one that we love that we think might be available at 7 or 8 or 9. That's where it becomes really intriguing. And
yeah,
they have no way of knowing, because you don't know who's going to go 2, 3, 4. But they have to do as much homework on that as they will what's going to happen at 6, 7, 8.
They did bring Dickinson to supper. They brought him to supper.
You should.
Yeah.
You should. What if Dickinson, if Dickinson ends up at 9, 10, that scenario that we were just talking about before, about grabbing 26, another premium pick.
Yeah.
One of your defensemen, two of your defensemen. I don't know. Like,
yeah, listen, my head tells me that in their ideal world, they'd like to get one of Demidov or Lidstrom and one of Iginla or Seneca. I could be way wrong here, but
yeah, the question is those other two guys that you mentioned.
Yeah,
do they want to take them at 5? And maybe they will. Maybe they will if they see them as ahead of whichever defenseman is available to them that they may not have as highly ranked as those two players. I have no idea. But I do know that if those two players are, if Lindstrom and Demidov are gone by the time we get to 5, the Canadiens have another player circled on their list who they don't think would go as high as 5 or 6. Maybe they look at 7, 8, 9 and say, is there a fit here for us?
If they pass on Tija Ginla, though, they and I know that most people I seem to think that Ginla is going to go after 5, but you really there's so much character in that bloodline. Like there's so much character in that family.
Mm-hmm. I get it.
You have to really think long and hard, man, because sometimes they say the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And based on what we saw from Tija Ginla down the stretch and some big goals in the playoffs, I mean, this guy oozes character, and they need it. I mean, we take a look at what's going on in the playoffs, and I understand he's not his dad, right? And it would be that would probably be a little bit too much to put on anybody, but he's not big, but he plays with a lot of grit and a lot of character.
He's not small either.
No, he's not small.
He's going to get bigger too.
Yeah.
We're looking at those pictures from the NHL posting about the combine, Suzuki, McDavid, all they like. Did you see how small those guys look?
Yeah. By the way, we haven't even talked about Berkeley Catton yet, who's got more talent, they say, than pretty much all of them, other than Celebrini and Demidov.
Hey Tony, I'm going to say this. Like, I admittedly, and I said this last week, and I don't know if people got it kind of twisted, but I'm not an expert on the draft. Like,
neither am I.
And I try to do as much research as possible. I'm as interested in it as anybody, but I'm not an expert on it. But from what I've seen, I really like Tija Ginla. Like, I really like that player. Whether or not the Canadiens like him enough to take him 5th overall, we're going to find out. And, especially if Lindstrom and Demidov are gone, and potentially that player could be added 5. I think he's an NHLer all day, every day. I don't know if he's a guaranteed top 6 NHLer, which is part of the reason why he's ranked a little lower than those guys are, right? So, but so is Jarome Iginla. So yeah. Pretty similar. Where did Iginla go to Dallas? So was it 10th or 11th?
9th, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Whatever.
No. Pardon me. I think he won 11th.
I'll tell you.
I think he won. I'm pretty sure he won 11th because Craig Budden has talked about it on more than one occasion. Let me look it up. He won 11th. Yes.
Like, I don't know where Iginla is going to go in this draft, but if he's still available at 9, are the Calgary Flames going to be able to not take him? Like, I'd be so shocked if they didn't take that player. So
he would. If he's available, they cannot pass on him. You remember who the Canadiens took that draft that Iginla went 11th?
Which draft?
The Jarome Iginla, that was 1995.
1995. Well, it wasn't Koivu.
No, it was Terry Ryan.
Terry Ryan.
Yeah. He had scored, I think, 50 goals in the WHL, and they took him 8th, and Jarome Iginla went 11th. And Terry Ryan, God love him, he didn't play a lot of games in the National Hockey League, did he?
I'm pretty sure if you redrafted that, Jarome Iginla goes number 1. So.
That year, Jarome Iginla goes number 1, yes.
Who went number 1 that year?
Ottawa, Brian Berard.
Yeah.
And Ottawa had Wade Redden.
Mm-hmm.
Then there was a swap or something, right?
I don't know.
But
take Iginla over everyone.
I think it's safe to say that draft, Jarome Iginla was 1,554 games. It's unbelievable.
And Craig pulled off one of the great trades of all time that people will look at and be like, it's crazy, right? But they don't win the cup without Joe Nieuwendyk.
No, they don't win the cup without Joe Nieuwendyk.
It's pretty hard to trade a guy like Jarome Iginla. when he's about to go. You know, it's not like they didn't know what he was.
Yeah, it wasn't Craig who pulled it off, though, right? It was Bob Gainey. Bob Gainey was the GM of the Dallas Stars when they won the Cup.
I think Craig was involved.
Craig was his assistant.
Okay, he was involved. Obviously.
Yes, of course, 100%.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
So
1,000% he was. Yeah.
Crazy deal.
All right, one more. Let's just do one more here. If you could put a percentage on the likelihood Demidov or Lindstrom available at 5. I mean, this coming in from Ben, but I think it's safe to say that the Chicago Blackhawks are the wild card in all this, right? If the Blackhawks draft a defenseman, then they're going to be available.
Columbus is going to be interesting. I would put it at a 0% chance that both will be available at 5.
Trevor Timmins, and he's not the only one, and he's not going to have final say, will draft one of Lidstrom or Demidov.
Maybe like
1,000% in my
Lev
opinion.
Shunov is for whatever reason sinks to 4. Like, can Columbus turn away from that? I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do, but I know this. I don't know what the percentage is that one of those guys will be available at 5, but I would put it at like less than 1% that both of them will be.
I'm hoping I could predict the top 5 in the draft this year.
Can you do it? You're going to be there live. Is he like?
I am. I had a.
I think you should get. You're going to Vegas.
I had a nice
outfit.
Yeah.
Get like a genie like type outfit, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And do your predictions live on the floor. That would be phenomenal.
I had a nice payday the Slavkovsky draft.
Oh boy.
I had Slavkovsky 1, Nemitz 2, Cooley 3, and Wright 4.
Paid for the Vespa?
No, the Vespa was more than that. The Vespa was more than that. But
you had Wright 4th?
Yeah. Listen, so full disclosure here. I mean, up until a month before the draft, I mean, I thought Wright was going to go to the Canadiens, and then a couple of weeks leading up to the draft, and the week of the draft, there was more and more talk of Slavkovsky, of course. And then I still wasn't sure if the Canadiens were going to take Slavkovsky over Wright, but I said, okay, if Slavkovsky goes 1, Wright's not going to go 2 because New Jersey already have Hischier and they already have Jack Hughes. So New Jersey is going to draft a defenseman. Who's the number 1 rated defenseman in the draft? It was Nemitz. And Jiricek was the 2nd ranked defenseman in the draft. And at that point, I said, Phoenix is going to go with a centerman. And are they going to draft Shane Wright or are they going to draft Logan Cooley? And I just had a feeling that Logan Cooley was more of an Andre Tourigny type of player than Shane Wright was. And that's why I went 1, 2, 3, 4. But to tell you that I was certain, like I picked them, yes. Was I certain that was going to be the top 4? I wasn't certain, but I had a good enough feeling to bet money on it, but I would not have bet money on that order 2 weeks before.
Listen, Tony.
But 2 days before, I felt good about it.
I'm sure the Canadiens are dying to know who's going to go 2, 3, 4. And if you know, you should give them a call.
Yeah, unfortunately, I do not know. That's what I'm trying to find out so I can make some money again. Eric, you are money, my friend. Always a lot of fun. Thanks for doing this. I think everyone appreciated it. And you want to do one more? One more?
2 more.
2 more. Okay.
2 more.
2 more. All right. Let's go. Confirm Rex. Is leadership, mentorship underrated amongst NHL fans? Eric?
Probably. Yeah. It's, although in the same breath, I think there was a lot of fans that were screaming about not wanting to trade David Savard because how important his mentorship was to the young defensemen of the Canadiens. And so I think there's a great portion of them that obviously respect and appreciate that element. I'll tell you as a cautionary tale, like I look at what happened in Ottawa over the last number of years under different ownership and different management. They clearly didn't value it enough. And you see the product of it. Like, I think Thomas Chabot is a really good example of what happens when you don't properly insulate a player. Because I think Chabot is a very good player, by the way. I think when he was drafted, he had the potential to become a top 5 defenseman in the league. And I think it was really unfair to put him in a position where he was going to have to play 26, 27 minutes a night just because he doesn't need an oxygen tank to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Without anybody around him who could take on heavier matchups in front of him and just, if you want to go back in time, a very similar story. I remember Tyler Myers' rookie season, won the Calder Trophy, was candidate for the Norris practically. And I think everybody in the hockey world looked at him and said, this guy's going to be absolutely unbelievable. And what was neglected in that situation was how important Tony Lidman and Henrik Talander were to that player so that he could be in a position where he was not overexposed. And the Sabres lost both those players the following summer, and Tyler Myers was never the same after that. He's rebounded well later in his career. But it's to say that you're looking at two guys there, in Myers and Shabbat, who could have been among the 5 best defensemen in the league that we'd be talking about right now in that breath. And not having that proper insulation, mentorship, it hurt them. Now, I think they're both good players. Are they what they should have been when they were drafted? I think you'd have a really hard time arguing that.
Tyler Myers, who was acquired by the Winnipeg Jets in the Evander Kane deal of Kane going to Buffalo with Zach Bogosian. And along with Tyler Myers to Winnipeg went Brendan Lemieux and Yoel Armia, as well as Drew Stafford. All right, okay, one more, because Eric gets it too. We got one. There you go. Here we go. Gary McDonald. What do you think of Crosby signing with Montreal after next season? I know it's a long shot, but I think Montreal was his childhood team. Maybe he wants to play here to end his career, one season.
I think it's a fantasy and a dream that I'd be first in line to see happen. I'd love to see it, and not because I'm a Canadian. I'm not a Canadiens fan. I don't care one way or the other. I just think the idea of Sidney Crosby in a Montreal Canadiens uniform would be the most exciting thing possible for the fans and for me to write about. But I got to be honest. I don't believe that Sidney Crosby will ever play for another team. But if the door ever opens for him to play for another one, it'll be Colorado, in my opinion.
To go play with Nathan McKinnon. And I got to tell you something. When I think of Crosby, I think of Patrice Bergeron as well, and he only played for one team, so that would make sense. Eric, a lot of fun. You said, are you going to Vegas, by the way? Are you going?
No, I'm going to New York for the NHL Board of Governors meeting.
Okay.
We've got a lot of people going to Vegas. Like, we've got people, like I said, not the biggest draft expert, but our guy Luke Fox is fantastic. And we have Sam Cosentino as a big part of the coverage, and obviously the broadcast, Jeff Merrick. And, you gotta go with what your bread and butter is. And to me, that's a very, very difficult assignment for someone who's constantly on a beat that's NHL. Yeah. But I think if the Canadiens had been in the top 3 or even number 1 for sure, I'd be in Vegas. It's gonna be. You're going to the Sphere. It's the last draft. The GM's in attendance and the team's in attendance, at least for the foreseeable future. You and I know you're going with Sammy and Yellow are going as well. Yeah. You guys are going to have the time of your lives. It is going to be incredible.
I hope so, and I hope it's not going to be as hot as they're advertising, over 40 degrees, because can you imagine Tony Marinaro walking down the strip over 40 degrees with in the kind of shape that I'm in? Imagine how many spray bottles I'm going to have. I'm going to have a spray bottle for Sam. I'm going to have Agnello holding a couple of spray bottles as well to start spraying me as I'm walking down.
And you'll be double fisting tequilas, and you'll be double fisting spray bottles.
There we go. Thank you, Eric. We'll talk to you soon, my man.
Take care.
All right. Once again, special thanks to Betway, a leading global online betting and gaming brand, offering you a leading betting experience. Go to betway.com or scan the QR code to join the action. Must be 18 and over and play responsibly. Want to thank Energy Transportation Group, who have been with us since early on, the Geloso Beverage Group, Tibi, who have been with us since the very, very beginning, and Playground for all their support. We very, very much appreciate it. And we always look forward to getting out there and seeing you. And it's one of the things that we started here over the last little while, and we plan to do a lot more of it. A couple of weeks ago, we were at Souvlaki Authentique on Notre Dame Street in Lachine, and we liked it so much, and they liked it so much, that we're actually going to be there again tomorrow, this time at another location at 410 Chemin de la Grande Côte in Boisbriand. So they have 7 locations across Quebec. And so we're going to be at the Boisbriand location tomorrow. And we're going to have a podcast for you, a Habs podcast at 1 p.m. And you know what? I might even do a special Euro 2024 podcast at around noon. That's not official yet, but it's something I'm thinking of. We're there. We might as well just, why not? Let's have some fun. And so we look forward to seeing you there tomorrow. If you want to drop by Souvlaki Authentique in Boisbriand, Special thanks to Terry and Costa for their hospitality. We appreciate it. We'll see you there tomorrow. Once again, for all of you watching, thanks so much. If you liked it, share it. Comment sick, share it with your friends. Leave us a 5-star review on Apple. It's our way of feeling the love. And reminding you, Thursday, June 27, road tests all day at Mekamoto on Rue de la Roche in Mont-Royal, your Moto Guzzi, Piaggio, and Vespa dealer. For Yellow and Sammy at Master Control, they're Cavallaro. Have a good night, everyone. I'm Marinaro.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. The Sick Podcast is brought to you by Energy Transportation Group, driven to be different. LaBita.tb, embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination.